Okay, Braves. So this is going to be part 3 of your Q1 makeup project walkthrough. I've gone over the other 2 steps, so if you need help with ecological roles or abiotic factors, check out the other videos. They are on my YouTube page, and they are on Google Classroom under classwork. Okay, so this one is all about ecological relationships. And if you remember, ecological relationships are different survival strategies, essentially, that organisms use. They use it to either acquire resources like food and water, space, shelter, territory, mates, things like that. And how they go about doing these things is species specific. There are lots of different ways to demonstrate competition. There's lots of different ways to demonstrate predation. There's lots of different types of mutualism and commensalism and parasitism. So you don't want to get hung up on any one example necessarily, in terms of you don't always want to be looking for the same type of mutualism everywhere because you're not going to find it. How things work together to benefit each other changes from species to species. So thankfully, this one is fairly straightforward because you can just look up examples as opposed to trying to go outside and identify these relationships. I totally admit on the Q1 project where you were supposed to be going out and finding this on your own, it's pretty tough to think about mutualism and commensalism and parasitism, when you're out there in the real world trying to identify it. So I agree that was the one tough part of the Q1 project. Now, thankfully, like I said, with this one, you just simply have to look this stuff up. And that's exactly what I'm going to show you how to do. So before I do that, I want to go over the definitions with you because you're supposed to read these slides before you get into actually doing the activity. I know a lot of you will take a look at this and immediately start doing it, and you need to pump the brakes and think about what you're supposed to be doing before you get there. So, all right, all of that aside, let's go on ahead and get into this. Predation. Anytime a body part is being eaten, that's predation. So a leaf is a body part of a plant. A branch is a body part of a plant. The bark is a body part of a plant. Roots are the body parts of plants. They don't want those eaten. They don't mind it, however, if you go and eat their fruit. In fact, that's what they want you to do. So if you see an animal eating a fruit, that is not an example of predation. That's actually mutualism. Okay, and I'll get into that in just a second. So this could be bugs eating on a plant. This could also be a dog eating a mouse, or a cat eating a mouse, or a dog eating a cat, or a lion eating a gazelle, or a spider eating a fly, or a praying mantis eating a spider. The point is, anytime something is involuntarily being eaten, that is predation. Competition is when you have two organisms in some way, shape, or form competing for the same resource. It doesn't have to be actual fighting. They don't actually have to be making contact with each other. Sometimes it's just a matter of you have lions and you have hyenas in the same area, and they're consuming the same foods. And even if they never see each other, they're competing for the same resource, in that every time a lion takes down one of the gazelle, that's one less gazelle for the hyena to eat. So it makes it harder for the hyenas to find the food they need. Thus, it's competition. It is a competition for points, essentially, or food, essentially. Think of it like points. Every time a lion, gets a gazelle, it goes one up. And every time a hyena gets a gazelle, it goes one up. And the idea is they're competing to see who can get the most gazelle, only they're just trying to survive, obviously. So they're not actually keeping points. Don't get confused. All right. Anyways, so that's what competition is. It can be plants. Plants compete as well. If you just go look at the lawn outside, all of those grass plants are competing for space and water and soil and sunlight and everything else. And that's what weeds are as well, growing in your lawn. They're competing for the same resources, which is why you get rid of the weeds. So then they're not competing against the things you want growing in your lawn, right? So competition can take many forms. Mutualism Mutualism is a relationship where both organisms are benefiting. So unlike competition, where they're both competing to get one over the other, mutualism is like they're holding hands together and singing Kumbaya. They're working together in some way. You've seen examples of, rhinos with birds on its back. The rhino's getting louses and bugs and annoying things off of it while the birds are getting something to eat. It's a plus. They both win. There's different types of fish species that will swim around sharks and clean their teeth of parasites and other things. The shark lets it happen because the parasites cause it harm, and the fish that are eating it are benefiting because they're getting a meal. So those are types of mutualism. Plants have mutualism as well. They have mutualism with animals. They produce fruits and flowers so that they can reproduce. Plants can't reproduce. Most plants can't reproduce on their own. So they've developed strategies for spreading out their seed, their seed and their pollen, their genetic information. So bees come along from one flower, get pollen stuck to it. They go to a different flower of the same species, and now that pollen is pollinating that flower, and that flower will turn into a fruit. And inside the fruit is a seed, and that's where the new baby plant grows out of, right? So the plant wants to be pollinated, so it provides nectar to attract them in. Same thing is true for fruit. They want their seeds to go somewhere away from them so they're not competing with their offspring. So here's a nice juicy fruit for you, bird. Come swallow this and poop my seeds out somewhere else. And that's what happens. So the animals are getting a benefit of a meal, and the plants are getting the benefit of being able to reproduce and to kick their children out of the house so they don't have issues later on down the road. That would be mutualism. Both things benefit. There are plants that if they grow next to other certain types of plants, both plants will actually support each other. I'm not going to get into examples like that, but that is also a real thing. So mutualism works across different species, of animals to plants, and even plants to plants, and even plants to fungi and bacteria. There's all sorts of different types of mutualism out there. So the reason I'm taking the time to explain this is because I don't want you to have a narrow view of what mutualism can be. It's a very broad concept that applies in all sorts of different relationships in the animal kingdom. So there's lots of it out there to find. And I don't want you to think this is like some rare, magnificent thing, like a diamond, you find walking along a beach. Okay, it's not that rare. It's a fairly common thing. Mutualism, commensalism. This one, again, and much like mutualism, is fairly common. So this is a relationship where one organism is being benefited, but the other organism in the relationship has no idea the relationship's occurring or is unaffected by it. One of the popular examples that's given in terms of animals is when hyenas and vultures will follow predators after they're killed. So if a lion or a jaguar takes down a large prey animal, it will eat its fill as much as it can. The hyenas will follow in after the jaguar leaves, or the jackals, or the, whatever. I think I got my continents mixed up. I'm pretty sure jaguars and hyenas never meet. I mean to say jackals there. Anyways, point being, the jackals will follow behind and clean up whatever is left behind by the jaguar, whatever it didn't finish eating. The jaguar doesn't care. It ate everything it was going to eat and it left. So it's not being affected at all. But the jackal is being, obviously benefited greatly because now it didn't have to go chase something down and eat it. It's got a free meal right there. So that's one example. A plant to animal example would be, say, squirrels nesting in trees, or birds nesting in trees, or frogs using leaves for shelter. Things like that, where the plant is completely unaffected. It doesn't even know the animals are living on it or near it or under it. But the animals themselves are benefiting by having a habitat or a place to live. So that would be an example of commensalism. So there's a lot of different types of commensalism out there. Again, don't narrow your frame too much. Finally, there's parasitism, and especially for this assignment, parasitism is a very, 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 very common way that organisms reproduce. You can, if you want to classify viruses as living, which it's kind of hard to do, you can consider them parasites, or they exhibit a parasitic relationship because they are infecting a host and they are using the host for some purpose. For viruses, it's to reproduce, because viruses can't reproduce on their own. And this is why they're oftentimes considered non-living. They can't reproduce unless they are inside of a host, invading the host cells, and then they hijack the cells to make more viruses. That would be a parasitic relationship. You don't want your cells damaged by viruses. You don't want to get sick. You don't want to have COVID-19, right? But there's other types of parasites. There's larger parasites. There are things like tube worms that will, intestinal worms that latch onto the inside of your intestines, and they slowly start to filter out the food that you eat. So you're getting less and less nutrition. And as they grow inside of your intestines, you get less and less and less over time. You get more and more sick. So that's one example, or several examples there, of parasitism. Parasitism is obviously very common because you have things like mosquitoes, you have things like vampire bats and ticks, and all sorts of different little creatures that are looking to suck out life juice from you, essentially. And they benefit while you obviously lose whatever it is that they take from you. So it's a plus-minus relationship, and that's the important thing about parasitism. Now, it's different from predation because you're not being eaten. You're just having resources taken from your body or taken away from you. So don't think that parasitism is like eating leaves. No, eating leaves would be predation. However, if I'm sucking out the juice of a leaf slowly over time, that would be considered parasitism. Okay, it's the same thing as what a mosquito does or a leech does. So, okay, that gives you all of the different examples there of what we're looking for. So now we got to go find them. Let's look at the instructions first, because a lot of people are going through these too quickly. So you want to use your web browser to find these relationships. You're going to add a photo, and then you need to explain how and why it's an example of the relationship. It's not good enough to say that it's this relationship. You have to explain why. Okay? So let's go on ahead and get into it. Predation. I'm going to give you one example. Predation. In order to find this, you can either type in carnivores in the Amazon rainforest, and you'll get examples of carnivores. Look up what they eat, go find a picture of that thing eating that thing, and then boom, you've got it. You can even do the same thing with herbivores. So just pick an animal, really, say a turtle or whatever, that be specific on the species. But maybe it's a howler monkey. Right? I'll keep using that example, a black howler monkey. Okay, well, I'll go and look at what a black howler monkey eats real quick. So let's do that. Black howler monkey diet. Okay, I know that they eat tree and vine leaves, flowers, and tropical forest fruits. Okay, well, the plant wants you to eat its fruits, so that doesn't count. However, the plant doesn't want you to eat its leaves. So if I go find myself a photo of it eating the leaves off of let's see, I'll just say black howler monkey eating leaves. Gotta find an example, right? There it is. Boom. This is an example of predation. That plant doesn't want its leaves eaten. It doesn't want its branches ripped off and consumed. So that would be an example. I go in here. Example number 1, black howler monkey eating tree leaves. This is an example of predation because the tree whose leaves are being eaten doesn't want this to occur. The black howler monkey is how do I want to say this? Let's think about it for a second. Is actively consuming part of the plant. There we go. So I'm actually demonstrating, hey, it's not just eating a fruit, it's not just eating a flower, it's actually eating part of the plant, thus it is commensalism. And this is involuntary on part of the plant. So I got both of those in there. And look, it's 2 sentences. So then what I want to do is grab my photo of the black howler monkey eating the leaves of a plant, save howler monkey. All right, and then I go add that in there. So insert. Now, I want to be very specific here. It is not okay to simply get a picture of a black howler monkey. You need to find a picture of the black howler monkey actually eating the leaves of the plant. Same thing if you pick a jaguar eating some random animal. You gotta find a photo of that thing doing the relationship. This is much easier because you can just simply ask Google to find that for you, and it will most of the time, okay? So, okay, that's how you go about doing the predation. That one's really super simple. Let's go for competition. Well, the great thing about the rainforest is plants are growing everywhere, and anytime you have plants growing on top of plants, that's competition. So let's go plants, Amazon, rainforest. Maybe I was too specific. Here we go. This is good enough. This will work. So what you have here is you can see the ferns down here. You can see this plant down here. I don't know what type of a plant this is necessarily, but you have plants growing over the tops of other plants, shading them out, and then these plants here are being shaded out by these trees. So this is an example of competition. What are they all competing for? Sunlight, space. You can even say they're competing for soil resources if you wish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. I'm going to add my photo in. Boink. Okay, so I got my photo here. And example number 1. How do I want to go about this? Plant competition on the forest floor. All right, this is an example of competition because the plants in the photo are all growing over one another. The plants, I'll say the big-leaved plants, are being shaded out by the trees above. And the ferns underneath the large leafed plants are being shaded out by it. Thus, they are all competing for, oops, spelled competing wrong, sunlight. Now, that's 2, maybe 3 sentences. And this is, when you start getting into these examples, you really have to spell this out. Don't just say the plants are competing for sunlight. Explain what is going on in the picture, because it's not always obvious in the pictures that you're giving me that that's what's happening. Okay, so give me some solid, explanation of what your example is. Okay, there you go. Got that one. Let's go on to mutualism. This one might be harder to find. However, remember, flowers are examples of mutualism. I'm just going to want you to obviously find it in the actual act of pollination, then that would count, okay? But let's go ahead and find something a little bit different. We'll go mutualism and Amazon rainforest. And when I do this, you will see that immediately several examples or websites start popping up that have examples about mutualism in the Amazon rainforest. As I go down here, I will start reading. It's obviously talking about flowers here, pollen and nectar. It starts talking about fruits, things like that. And then it gets into leafcutter ants. They take the leaves down into their little colonies. They ferment the leaves with a particular type of fungus. And the relationship is between the ant and the fungus. And the ants feed the fungus, so the fungus grows and reproduces. So it's happy because it just wants to reproduce. And the ants are happy because they eat the fungus, kind of like we do with corn, or like we do with, you know, anything that we grow to eat, tomato plants, so on and so forth. So it's a symbiotic relationship. They're both helping each other out, even though one is eventually kind of getting eaten. Okay, so you would want to find an example of this somewhere. Let's use this one. I'll use this one because I don't want to take the low-hanging fruit here. So I'll take this one. It's going to be harder to find. Let's see. Leaf cutter ant fungi. And let's see if we can find a photo. Now that might be it right there. Here you go. So we have an example of our leaf cutter ants. And here is the fungus growing. And you can see they're taking little pieces of this and they're adding it on, and then the fungus grows on top of it, and then they kind of munch on the fungus. What do you know? So I'm going to save that image. And I'll go in here and add that in. Shrink it down. Put that there for now. Okay. Leaf cutter ant farming. The ants are growing fungi by feeding it leaves. The ants then eat the fungi. The ants benefit because they have a steady source of food. The fungi benefits because it gets the nutrients it needs to grow and multiply. Thus, it's a plus-plus relationship. Boom. Example of mutualism. Done. Commensalism. Let's go on ahead and get into that. So that one's going to be a little harder, and this is one I actually would recommend you just type in Commensalism Amazon rainforest. Make sure you spell it correctly, obviously. Alrighty. I like this website, Sciencing. It seems to have a lot of stuff about the Amazon rainforest, so I've been using it pretty heavily for examples for you guys who are emailing me. All right, so you can see that there are several different examples here of mutualism. And you can pick any one of these. Ants help birds find food. Now, you can go find that if you want. Flower mites hitchhike on hummingbirds. Great. So the hummingbird's not affected, but the flower mites, they get the benefit of finding a new thing to go and cause havoc to, basically. Let's do that one. Let's do that one. So, mites hitchhiking on hummingbirds. All right, so here you go. Right here. These little mites, they take flight on their beaks, and then they jump off on the plants to go eat them. This is a great photo. Here we go. Add that in. All right. Mites hitchhiking on hummingbirds. This is an example of commensalism because, all right, the hummingbird is unaffected by the mite, and the mite benefits by making it to a new food source. All right, I'll describe it up here. So mites hitchhiking on hummingbirds, well, I guess that pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? I guess I could, as hummingbirds move from flower to flower. All right. So again, you can see that my E key is sticking. You can see that I'm describing that one is benefiting, one is, not affected at all, thus commensalism. You have to explain that, okay? There you go, that's commensalism knocked out. And the last one is parasitism. Now, the Amazon rainforest is full of parasites. So, in the Amazon rainforest, you should be able to find tons of examples. And here you can see that it already is talking about several of them straight out the bat. I can also just say parasitism in the Amazon rainforest, in which case I will get some different, more interesting results probably. So there's this one, which apparently the parent plant is parasitic to whatever tree or plant that it's taking energy away from, and then it blooms this gigantic flower. That's cool if you want to use that example. Let's see what else is here. Gotta look for it. Aphids, strangler fig. The strangler fig. That one is a very popular example. So let's go ahead and use that. The strangler fig. Strangler fig. So what the strangler fig does is it grows up the side of the plant. It takes away nutrients from the roots of the plant that it's attached to, the tree that it's attached to. And it uses the trees to basically grow up, go away, Britannica, grow up to where it can get to the very tip top of the canopy, so it can get to the sun. And once it does that, it starts spreading out. It eventually kills the tree that it's on, but now it's had all this time to grow up and create these nice, strong vines that almost act eventually like little miniature trunks. And now it has a support basically to be a tree itself. Now, it's not a tree, it's a vine. But when you look at it, after it's killed off its host, it's like, oh, that's a weird looking tree. And then it produces its fruit and everything else. So this is a parasitic relationship because that tree doesn't want the strangler fig growing on it, and it's having its resources taken from it. So it's being negatively impacted while the strangler fig is being positively impacted. So I'm going to go grab an image first. This one's pretty cool. All right, is it in here? The strangler fig climbing on trees and stealing their resources. This is an example of parasitism because the tree is having its nutrients, water, and sunlight stolen by the strangler fig, which benefits from the tree, which has already grown to the upper canopy. All right, there you go. There's an example of parasitism. And that, my friends, is all you have to do. So once you get down to parasitism and give me your two examples, you're done. So this one was a fairly quick video, straightforward. Really the longest part was me talking at the beginning so you understood what each of these things are. And yeah, this is a much easier step to do using the internet than actually going out and finding in the ecosystem. So anyways, I hope this was useful for you. And I got the biodiversity survey coming up. I'll get that done tomorrow and published as soon as I can. So I will catch y'all later.